I was so pretty, they didn't realize I'm not a woman. That's what Sergeant Kean told me, cigarette trembling in his hand, 3 hours after we pulled him out of the hellmouth of Sector 4. He wasn't bragging, he was stating a tactical fact that defied every law of probability. In this line of work, we talk about camouflage in terms of tiger stripes, ghillie suits, and mud. We talk about blending into the foliage. But sometimes, the most effective cover isn't about hiding, it's about being seen, staring the enemy right in the eyes, and letting their own assumptions kill them. Welcome back to the perimeter. I'm the sentry. Keep your head down and listen close, because today we're declassifying a miracle from the archives of the impossible. This wasn't a standard recon sweep. This was deep insertion. Northern Laos, 1971. The target was a jagged spine of limestone karsts the locals called the Devil's Teeth. Intel suggested a heavy NVA forward command post was dug into the caves, coordinating movement all along the trail.
We didn't need a platoon to kick down the door. That would have invited a rain of heavy artillery we couldn't handle. We needed a ghost. We needed Kean. Kean was a South Vietnamese ranger attached to our SOG unit. Small frame, delicate features, nerves of absolute tungsten. The plan was insanity. The NVA officers in that sector were utilizing local villagers as servitude staff for their officers' mess inside the cave complex. Kean was going in, not as a soldier, not even as a male. He was going in as a servant girl to replace a local asset who had fallen ill. The disguise was absolute. The ao dai, the traditional silk tunic, hid the wiry muscle of a killer. A black wig, a touch of powder, and a demeanor of submissive terror completed the picture. But the visual lay of the land is only 10% of the job. The rest is the smell of fear. If you smell wrong, if you move wrong, you're dead before you hit the floor. Kean walked into that camp at 0600. He walked past the perimeter guards, past the heavy machine gun nests, and right into the lion's den. He was carrying a basket of fruit and a concealed, silenced Makarov pistol taped to the inside of his thigh, high up. For 6 hours, he poured tea, he cleaned tables, he listened to the enemy discuss grid coordinates and supply drops. He was invisible because he was so pretty, as he put it. They looked at the face, the silk, the hair, and their brains turned off the threat assessment centers. They saw a harmless girl. They didn't see the Reaper standing 3 feet away. But this is where the story shifts from a spy thriller to something else, something we don't put in the official after-action reports. Around 1400 hours, the base commander, a colonel with eyes like flint, called Kean over. The colonel was drunk on rice wine, paranoid and edgy. He grabbed Kean's wrist. The grip was iron. Kean told me later that was the moment he prepared to die. His Adam's apple was hidden by a high collar, but his hands, though small, were rough, calloused from trigger pulls and rope climbs, not from washing rice. The colonel stared at Kean's hand. He ran a thumb over the calluses.
The room went silent. The other officers stopped talking. The air pressure in the cave dropped, the way it does right before a lightning strike. Kean's heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, but he didn't pull away. To pull away was an admission of guilt. Then Kean heard it. It wasn't a sound in the room. It wasn't the colonel speaking. It was a voice, clear as a bell, ringing inside the center of his skull. It didn't sound like his own thought. It sounded like static cutting through a radio. Drop the tray. Kean didn't hesitate. He didn't question the hallucination. He went limp. He let the heavy brass serving tray in his other hand crash to the stone floor with the force of a thunderclap. The noise was deafening in the small cave. Glass shattered. Tea splashed onto the colonel's boots.
The colonel jumped back, startled, releasing Kean's hand to brush the hot liquid off his uniform. The tension broke instantly. The colonel roared in anger, backhanding Kean across the face. It was a brutal hit, splitting his lip, but it wasn't a lethal one. It was the reaction of an annoyed master to a clumsy servant, not a soldier discovering a spy.
The inspection of the hand was forgotten. The distraction, triggered by that voice, had reset the colonel's loop. Kian scrambled back, bowing apologetically, playing the part of the terrified girl, and retreated to the shadows of the kitchen area. He was shaking, not from the hit, but from the voice. He knew, with the certainty of a man standing on a ledge, that if he hadn't dropped that tray at that exact microsecond, the colonel would have realized those hands belonged to a rifleman. He had the intel. He had the map coordinates memorized. It was time to go. But the universe wasn't done with him yet. The plan was to slip out during the shift change at 1800. But at 1745, the base went to condition red. We never found out why.
Maybe a perimeter tripwire was tripped by a bore. Maybe they intercepted a radio burst from our overwatch team on the ridge. Sirens began to wail. Flares popped in the sky, bathing the jungle in a sick, flickering red light. Keen was trapped in the kitchen annex of the cave. He couldn't walk out now. Every soldier was at their post, weapons hot. The disguise that had been his armor was now his cage. He couldn't run in a silk dress. He stripped it off. Underneath, he wore simple black shorts and a dark shirt. He transitioned from pretty servant to commando in 3 seconds. He drew the Makarov. He had to cross 200 meters of open ground to reach the tree line where the jungle density would give him a chance. 200 meters of enemy encampment teeming with NVA regulars. He moved to the cave mouth. The rain had started, a monsoon downpour that fell in sheets, reducing visibility to 0. That was his first miracle. The noise of the rain masked his footsteps. He sprinted. He made it past the first checkpoint by sliding under a parked supply truck.
He could see the boots of the guards patrolling inches from his face. He waited for the thunder to roll, timing his movements with the crashes of the sky. He was 50 meters from the tree line when the spotlight hit him. It was a sweep light from a guard tower. It caught him dead center. A shout went up. "Spy! Spy in the wire!" The air around him instantly turned into a swarm of angry bees. AK-47 rounds snapped and hissed, tearing up the mud around his feet. Kian dove into a shallow drainage ditch, crawling through sewage and mud, the bullets chewing up the lip of the trench above him. He was pinned. He had 1 magazine, a pistol, and an entire battalion waking up to kill him. He looked at the tree line. It was 40 meters away. It might as well have been the moon. There was a heavy machine gun, a DSHK, swiveling toward his position. He could hear the gears grinding. Once that gun opened up, the ditch would become his grave. Then the static returned. The voice. Left. 3 paces. Now. It was illogical.
To go left meant leaving the cover of the ditch and exposing himself to the open ground. It was suicide. Every tactical neuron in his brain screamed to stay low. But the voice wasn't asking, it was commanding. It pushed him, a physical sensation like a hand on his back. Kian rolled left. He scrambled out of the ditch, exposed, vulnerable, running 3 frantic paces into the open mud. Boom. An RPG round slammed into the exact section of the ditch he had just occupied. The explosion was massive, sending a geyser of mud and shrapnel into the air. If he had stayed, he would have been pink mist. The shockwave knocked him flat, ringing his ears, but he was alive. He scrambled up, disoriented, mud plastered to his eyes. Don't stop, run straight. He ran blindly into the wall of lead. Tracers zipped past his ears like angry hornets. He could feel the heat of them. 1 round grazed his shoulder, a hot poker of pain, but he didn't slow down. He was moving in a fugue state, entirely surrendered to the instinct, to the voice.
He hit the tree line. He crashed through the elephant grass, the thick, serrated blade slicing his skin. He didn't stop until he was deep in the canopy, until the darkness of the jungle swallowed him whole. But he wasn't safe yet. The NVA were pouring into the jungle after him. They had trackers. They had dogs. Kian moved fast, checking his compass. Our extraction LZ was a hilltop clearing 3 clicks east. He was running on adrenaline and terror. The jungle was alive with the sounds of pursuit. He reached a fork in the game trail. To the right, the path led up toward the high ground, the logical route to the LZ. To the left, it dipped down into a ravine, a dead end of thick brambles and rock. Tactical doctrine says, take the high ground, always. Go down, the voice whispered. It was weaker now, like a dying battery. Go into the dark. Kien stopped. He looked up the hill. It was the way home. Going down meant getting cornered, but the voice had saved him from the colonel. It had saved him from the RPG. He turned left. He slid down the muddy embankment into the ravine, burying himself under a rotting log and a pile of wet leaves. He held his breath. The Makarov clutched to his chest. 30 seconds later, a squad of NVA regulars sprinted past the fork. They didn't even pause. They rushed up the right-hand trail, shouting, firing blindly into the brush. They were so sure he had gone for the high ground. If he had taken that path, he would have run right into their blocking force. Keen lay in the mud for an hour, letting the patrol pass, letting the forest settle. When he finally moved, he moved like a phantom. He flanked the enemy search parties, moving slow, moving quiet. He reached the LZ at 2300 hours. We were there waiting. We had a bird inbound, a slick Huey coming in hot. We heard the rustle in the grass and nearly lit him up, but he whistled, the code signal, Yankee Doodle. We pulled him onto the chopper. He was a wreck. His silk disguise was long gone. His body was covered in mud, blood, and leeches. He looked like something the jungle had chewed up and spat out.
As we lifted off, the NVA opened up on the LZ. Green tracers floated up past the skids. The door gunner opened up with the M60, answering the hate with a stream of fire. We banked hard, pulling G's, escaping the gravity of the devil's teeth. I sat across from Kien. I handed him a canteen and a cigarette. He took a long pull of water, his hands shaking so bad he spilled half of it. He looked at me, his eyes wide, pupils dilated, staring at something 1,000 yards away. "You okay, Kien?" I yelled over the roar of the rotor blades. "You made it." He touched his face. He touched the split lip where the colonel had hit him. He looked down at his small, calloused hands. "I was so pretty," he mumbled, the smoke drifting from his lips. "I was so pretty. They didn't realize I wasn't a woman." I nodded, thinking he was in shock. "Yeah, Kien, good disguise." He shook his head violently. He leaned in close, grabbing my flak vest. "No, not the disguise sentry. The voice. It liked the disguise. It told me when to drop the tray. It told me to jump." I looked at him. I've seen combat stress. I've seen guys crack. But Kien's eyes were clear. He wasn't crazy. He was terrified of the thing that had saved him. "There was a mortar," he whispered, "at the ravine. After the patrol passed, a mortar team set up right on the high trail. If I had gone right, if I hadn't listened." He trailed off, looking out the open door at the dark jungle canopy below. We got the intel back to command. The strike package launched at dawn. The Devil's Teeth complex was obliterated. Secondary explosions rocked the valley for hours. We won the battle because a man in a silk dress served tea to a colonel and listened to a voice that shouldn't have been there. Kien never went undercover again. He transferred to a training unit, teaching hand-to-hand combat. He told me once, months later, that he never heard the voice again. It was a one-time contract, a guardian angel with a specific mission profile.
So, when you're out there in the bush and you get that feeling, that sudden, irrational urge to duck or turn left or stop moving, don't analyze it. Don't check your manual. You listen to it. Because out here, logic gets you killed. Miracles are the only reliable ammo we have. This is the Sentry. Watch your six. Signing off.